Scripture this morning comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 49, verses 14 through 16. But Zion said, "The Lord has forsaken me. The Lord has forgotten me." Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are even before me. And may the Lord add a blessing to the reading of his word.
So, today is Mother's Day. And I've entitled this sermon, though, The Maternal Heart of God. And I'm going to maybe surprise some of you. Did you know that God is not a man? Did you know that God is not a woman? God is genderless. God is God. It's hard for us to wrap our heads around that, isn't it? But even though we know that God is neither male nor female, most of our descriptions of God, we use a male imagery, don't we? We do. I do it too. You know, we have our Father. When we recite the Lord's Prayer, we say, Our Father. The traditional doxology says, Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. We use a male imagery for God. Part of that, let's be honest, was because of who wrote Scripture. They used male imagery because it was written by pretty much men. Actually, if you look at some of the language going all the way back, where it was actually written down, some of the imagery has nothing to do with either male or female. It uses different language because how do you describe God? Right? But there are a lot of feminine metaphors used in Scripture to describe God. The most common metaphor that is used for God is the imagery of a bird. A bird protecting the young. Exodus 19:14. God tells Moses to share this with Israel. You saw what I did to the Egyptians, and how I lifted you up on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Deuteronomy, Moses says to the Israelites, like an eagle protecting its nest, hovering over its young, God spread out the wings to hold of Israel and carried them on the back. Deuteronomy 32:11. And then in Ruth chapter 2, verse 12, Boaz says to Ruth, May you receive a rich reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you come to seek refuge. So this imagery, because when we know that the male bird may occasionally protect the young, it's usually the mother bird, isn't it? When we see the pictures and everything in nature, we see the mother bird protecting the young. The book of Psalms, we see Psalm 17:8. He is the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings. Psalm 57:1. I take refuge in the shadow of your wings until destruction passes me by. You will be, Psalm 19:4. You will be covered with feathers, and under the wings you will find refuge. And it's not just an Old Testament thing. We can find in Matthew 23:37 and Luke 13:34. We see Jesus himself using the mother bird imagery to describe himself. About the issues of Jerusalem. He says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gather her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Even Jesus himself describes that mother aspect. Interestingly enough, if you know much about especially the history of some of these other systems in the Middle East,
female gods were often depicted as birds. So this idea of this imagery of a female bird protecting, of watching over their young, would have been a familiar idea for everybody in that area, within that culture, within cultures around them. They would have recognized that female protecting the young imagery. They would have gotten that. And we see in these scriptures where God is using the imagery of an eagle, that magnificent, that powerful, the most almost feared bird, the bird of prey. But interestingly enough, what do we see here? What does Jesus describe himself as? Not as an eagle, not as a powerful conqueror, not as a magnificent, fearing type of bird, but instead he describes himself as a hen. A hen. Not exactly, unless you're a little kid and you've seen some of those videos online, not really a scary bird, right? A hen is not something that you think, you know, what we need to do, if we want to really strike fear into our enemies, let's make sure they see us as hens, right? No, it doesn't work that way. And yet Jesus describes himself as a hen. And I think it's such a great way for him to show who he really is. And it's compounded by the fact of, what did he ride into Jerusalem on? He rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. Not as a warrior king, but as a peacemaker. As loving, as compassionate, as watching out for those around him. So this imagery, this idea of protection was carried forward. And then as we go back into those feminine images of God, it's not just about birds. God even describes himself as a human mother. Isaiah 42:14, God has Isaiah share to the Israelites. For a long time I have kept silent. I have been quiet and held myself back. But now, like a woman in childbirth, I cry out, I gasp and pant. Isaiah 66:13, as a mother comforts her child, so will I comfort you, and you will be comforted over Jerusalem. You see, these words were spoken. It was at a very important time that these words were spoken by God to the Israelites, because it was at this time they were dealing with the exile to Babylon. The Jerusalem and the temple and everything had been torn down, had been destroyed, they had been attacked, and the people had been ripped out of their home. They'd been taken away from their home. They'd been taken away from everything they knew. They were conquered. They were no longer able to live their lives as they lived before. And like a child, what do? They cried out for the comfort of a mother. They cried out for the comfort of their God. They cried out saying, we need you. How many times have you seen a child, or even experienced it yourself, where a child is seeking their mother when they fall down and get hurt? They scrape their knee. Sometimes they call for dad, but let's be honest, more often than not, they usually ask for mom. And that's what these people were doing. They were calling out to the one they knew would comfort them and love them and show them what they needed. They were calling out to God. They were living in a foreign land. They felt forsaken. They felt like God had left them. Isaiah 49:15. Can a woman forget her nursing child, or show no compassion for the child of her womb? Even these may forget, yet I will not forget you. God was saying, I'm not going to forget you. You're still my people. You're going through some rough times, but you're still my people. Mothers do that. We know that. We know not all mothers do that. And we know that there are some who chose not to be mothers. There are those who chose to give up a child. And I get that. And I won't say I understand it because I didn't experience it myself. But what God is using is the imagery of a good mother. And I want to say those who necessarily gave up their child or chose not to be mothers aren't good. I'm just saying this is how a mother projects that love that God gives us. There's a story of this woman who'd been looking for her son for 48 some years. She had a relationship with a soldier during the Vietnam War. She got pregnant, gave birth. The soldier did not know. He was sent to another military base, and so knew nothing about the woman at all or the child. And there was no way to contact him that they were going to let that communication happen, the military at the time. She knew that the baby was a boy, but she was forced to give the boy up by her parents. He was mixed race, and during that time it certainly was not allowed. I mean, it was going to be a big issue. And so she gave up the child for adoption. But she never forgot him. She never forgot the son that she gave birth to. She never forgot. She kept praying. She kept seeking. She kept doing everything she could. And so she submitted her DNA to one of those websites, 23andMe, Ancestries.com, whatever it was. It doesn't say in the article. But she submitted her DNA. And one day, she got notification that somebody else had submitted their DNA. It was her son. So after 48 some years, she found this child that she thought she was never going to reconnect with. She said, I remember in the Bible it said, knock and it shall be opened, ask and you shall receive. And you know what? I wouldn't let go. You see, what was happening was that child was special. That was her child. That was her son. That child was engraved on the palm of her hand, like our scripture says. Not only that, but engraved in her DNA. And she was engraved in his DNA. And that's what God is talking about. Each of us is a child of his that is engraved not only on his palm, but in his very essence, in his DNA. And we are the same way. Our DNA is intermingled with God's DNA. We're marked, we're special, we're unique. And here's the wonderful thing. We all are. We're all children of God. We're all connected to him. We all have our names etched on his palm. Even those who have not accepted Christ yet. They are still special. They are still his. They are still loved. And we need to remember that. We need to understand that not only are we special, not only are we unique by God, but so is everyone else. And I know that may seem like, well, if you're saying everybody's special, that means nobody's special. And in a human perspective, you're absolutely right. That would be, wouldn't it? But we're not talking about humans. We're talking about God. God knows each and every one of us intimately and perfectly. God knows the numbers of hairs on our head. Some it doesn't take as long to count the hairs on our head, but he knows it. God knows each and every one of us perfectly and intimately. He has our names etched on his palm. I don't know if we can really comprehend that. Every time God uses their hands our names are seen. Every time creation, every time anything is done throughout the universe, we are a part of it because our names are etched on His hands. How amazing is that? We are, by the very description, we are a part of the entire universe too because of that. Do you realize how special you are? A lot of the time the world tells us you're not special. You're just like everybody else. I remember when our kids were little, they would have cries. I'd have no idea what was going on. I mean, I'm not saying that all dads are this way, but most dads are this way. The baby cries, you have no idea what to do. The mother knows exactly what that cry means. The mother is like, oh, yeah, he needs changed, your turn. Or, oh, yeah, it's about that time to eat. We don't have that connection, and yet God does. When we cry out, when we reach out, even if we don't say the words, God knows. God knows what our cry means. That's another way He is like a mother. He knows us so intimately that He knows what we mean when we reach out, when we cry out, when we can't even say the words. God hears exactly what we need. He knows exactly what we need. Understand how important you are. And so that is my challenge for this week. I want you to recognize how much you are loved by God. And really take that in. Sometimes we don't really realize that. We almost take it for granted. Or maybe we don't even think about it. But I want you to, this week, I want you to think about, pray about, recognize, and thank God for loving you so much. Recognize how special you are to God. Let's bow our heads.